In a time when law enforcement officers and law enforcement agencies seem to be getting an awful lot of bad press, it's time to start looking at the positive things that police officers do for us. Hi, this is Phil Gurski, President and CEO of Borealis Threat and Risk Consulting in Russell, Canada, listening to Canadian Intelligence, which is a podcast about all things national security related. As I was noting in my introductory remarks, you can't go on a website, open a newspaper, or listen to a radio broadcast these days in which there isn't some story about defund the police or allegations that law enforcement officers are doing all kinds of bad things here in Canada, United States, and around the world. And it's pretty hard to see anything positive these days. And I'm not going to deny that there have certainly been occasions on which things have gone badly wrong, and there's been some misconduct. Of course, the George Floyd case being perhaps the one everyone knows best. But as somebody who worked in security intelligence for more than 30 years and worked very closely alongside law enforcement here in Canada, I know that it's not the whole picture. That the men and women who are in uniform for us every day do an awful lot of good, and that needs to be recognized. So I thought I would bring onto the program today someone who's been in law enforcement in Canada for a very long time and has a really, really interesting past in sharing his knowledge and experiences with people abroad. I'm talking to Ben Maure, who is a RCMP officer. He also spent a little bit of time at CSIS on secondment, and he's written a fascinating book called Leading at the Edge, True Tales from Canadian Police in Peacekeeping and Peace Building Missions Around the World. So, Ben, welcome to the podcast.
Good morning, Phil, and thank you for inviting me.
So, as I said, you spent more than 30 years with the RCMP. You spent a little bit of time at CSIS as well. What is it that led you to write this book in the first place?
Well, Phil, I think it started actually quite a long time ago, and I'll tell your audience a little bit about me, where I come from.
Yes, please.
I'm from Montreal, French Canadian, and I come from very humble beginning. And so when I was in my early 20s, policing started to interest me a lot because I guess I love travel. I love to learn about different culture. And to me, I wanted to help people. So I had an opportunity to apply for the police organization I work for, which is the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, at quite a young age. And that has totally changed my life in a sense that it has given me a lot of opportunity, not just the RCMP as my organization, but also policing in general. And like I said, I come from humble beginning. Phil, when I joined the RCMP, I barely spoke English. You can still detect a little bit of an accent
A
here and
bit of
there,
an accent, but it's okay.
but it's okay, right? And then, well, my organization gave me a lot of opportunity to develop myself and become a better person. And it all started by number one, of course, being transferred from, I guess, Quebec to British Columbia. So, of course, English courses, and then worked in a detachment, general policing in the city of Surrey, British Columbia.
Just south of Vancouver, yeah.
Yeah, it's south of Vancouver. And so it gave me a lot of opportunities to work with the community. And one of the community I started to work with was when I was in Surrey there was a small Spanish community, and I took a lot of interest and then trying to bond with that community, just because I also being French Canadian, Spanish wasn't necessarily a difficult language to learn because it's also part of the Latin language, and so the RCMP really encouraged me to learn Spanish. So I had these opportunity to learn Spanish. I traveled to Mexico. I learned Spanish in Mexico. So when I come back, I could communicate with that community better. All that to say that throughout my career, policing and the organization gave me a lot of opportunity that I would probably not have gotten somewhere. For example, as I moved on, I obtained a degree, a bachelor degree in technology. When I joined the RCMP, I only had grade 12. I mean, nowadays grade 12, it's very difficult to find any type of
Yeah, no kidding. No, that's a long time ago,
when you look
Ben.
at that, right? So I came on with, like I said, humble beginnings, but I was able to get a bachelor degree in technology, and then following that, learn. I was encouraged to get a master's degree, and then in social justice. And on top of all this, while that's going, I also was encouraged to learn German as a language and a little bit of Cantonese as well. So you can see that policing gave me so many opportunities that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And I think to back to your message, Phil, when we see about policing and 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 what's happening in the news and policing being questioned, I get it, and it's important that we are that our actions are being scrutinized, absolutely. But I think there's a message being lost somewhere that policing is a very, very noble profession and can give someone really a sense in life. Now, as we go on, I'll explain also the opportunities that I had with policing. They were incredible. First of all, I love to travel. Well, guess what? Being from Quebec to British Columbia was already a big change. Like we have a huge country, and just that was an incredible. But once I had a couple of years within the RCMP and I learned the basic of policing, I was offered there was opportunity. One of them is about the subject today is about peacekeeping, right? So I was because by then, 1999, I had already almost 10 years of service because I joined in 1989, and so I could, and I spoke Spanish by then. So guess what? There's a UN mission in Guatemala that opens, and the United Nations had approached Canada for Canada to supply a few police officers. It was a smaller mission, and it was only 6 Canadian. And guess what? I made it through that. I was
Wow.
selected. And part of the reason is that why was I so? It's not like I was so special, but I spoke Spanish, and at that time there was not a lot of police officer in Canada that
Right.
spoke
Right.
Spanish.
Right.
So again, the policing get me this opportunity to develop and then to move on, right? So there's so many interesting things in policing, and that one can do in that career, and I think that's what the message is all about.
Right. Now, Ben, Ben, at one point in Canada, when you looked at either the RCMP or the Canadian military, it seems that our country was really well known for its openness to contributing law enforcement officers or soldiers to peacekeeping or peace building missions. Of course, Lester B. Pearson is renowned to have invented the whole peacekeeping idea in the United Nations in the 1950s. Do you think that's changed a little bit now? You hear all these stories where Canada has been decreasing the number of people it sends abroad, that we are surpassed by many other nations, like the Philippines, for example, that send many more individuals. Has Canada's role in sending people abroad changed? And from your perspective, having written Leading at the Edge, is this a good thing, a bad thing, or is it kind of neutral?
Well, I think it's a little bit outside. The question, Phil, is a little bit outside of the purview of my book, but I will comment on that for sure. Uh, we have not been involved as in many peacekeeping operation, and I guess in the last couple of years, for say. But as far from the policing perspective, but it's coming back, and I think there is a need. Canadian, we're very well liked overseas, and it may partly because we don't impose ourselves, but and then we are very professional, right? We adapt to a variety. Like look, Canadian, our society, how adaptive we have been. So I think from that we are very well seen, and then let's not forget that throughout the world, like uh, over the past probably 50 years, there's Canada has been in a lot of countries doing a lot of good things, from CIDA, like the development agencies that
Right.
in Africa and all this. So that they were even there before sometimes peacekeeping. So when you have a Canadian showing up there, they see the flag of Canada and they say, oh, this can, oh, Canada help us to have uh, to have water to our village and things like that, or a variety of things. So right off the bat, we're well liked, you know,
Right.
and so for sure. Now back to why maybe we're not into so many missions. There's a lot of political, of course, reason why we may not be in certain as involved in peacekeeping as we used to. Uh, I would say this is only Ben speaking. Budget has a lot to do also, right?
Of course. Of course.
Uh, because of course you have some countries that can probably send more officers at a cheaper price, right? So we're expensive. When you send Canadian abroad, it's expensive. So that has an aspect to play. But having said that, we are highly sought, and I can see, I can foresee in the future, in coming years actually, uh, police in peacekeeping being revived. There's a couple of missions out there already that are starting to pick up. Some in Africa. There's some bilateral engagement as well with Canada and other countries that want to send police officers. Our military is also very engaged, as you know, in I guess in peacekeeping mission.
Of
And as a
course.
matter of fact, with our military, many of the mission that we have participated as police officers probably would not have been possible without the support of the military, right? You take Afghanistan, for example. Without the Canadian military and the US and other military, there's no way that we could have survived in an environment as dangerous as that of Afghanistan and other countries. So the military is crucial in many aspects, right?
Of course. Ben, in the title of your book, you say the subtitle is True Tales from Canadian Police in Peace Building and Peacekeeping Missions Around the World. I know, and of course you know, there's a difference between peace building and peacekeeping. Can you walk the listeners through what that difference is?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean the peacekeeping. It was, I guess, the term coined by Juan Galtung back in the 70s. I guess the concept of peacekeeping encompasses peace building and peacemaking. And sometimes it's a little bit confusing, I understand. But, well, peacekeeping, I guess what we can say is nowadays the concept of peacekeeping, when we mention peacekeeping, will be including the peace making, and the peace building as well, which means, let's try to make that a little clear to your audience here. To make peace, you have war, you have a place, you have a country that's at war. Then you have the concept of peace, the peacemaking. So you would have probably the army would come first and try to make some peace before or stop the war, right? You want to stop the war
Right.
between the two factions, right? And then after that, you would have uh, the peace building, that aspect that countries can join in and try to sign some peace accords, and try on to build on on the peace within the country itself. That could be some, for example, well, if we take the example of Guatemala, right? Uh, return, you had refugees who had gone to Mexico during the war, then they're coming back. So there's a variety of programs that we're going to try to rebuild the country. So to reinsert those refugees, the ex-warrior, the ex-combatants, right? Now they've laid their weapon. Uh, Peace has been signed, but there's, what do they do? Some of them, all they've known is war. So you have to reintegrate them into civil society, and so therefore there's programs that the UN and the government will agree as part as peace accords to reintegrate it in society. Example, in Guatemala, where I went in 1999, one of the peace accord was the reintegration of uh, ex-combatant, and some of them, the government start to teach them how to grow coffee beans, and then into the coffee business, and so on and so forth. They had fincas, and so our job as back then was to go and visit those fincas, make sure that they were and fincas is the term in Spanish, just to base a coffee plantation.
Right. Right.
And so to make sure that they had everything they needed in order to succeed in their business. So these are parts of peace accord, and then you got the peacekeeping to keep on that peace. But it's also the term peacekeeping encompasses at times all these three terms. I hope I kind of make myself a little clear on that, but I do admit that these concepts can be a little confusing. But bottom line, you have war between two countries. You want to make peace. You want to stop the war. Then you want to bring uh, you want to build the peace with a variety of programs, and then you keep that piece going.
Right. So, you've been involved in quite a few missions, and we're going to get to that in a second. Peace building and peacekeeping, in whatever stage you want to call it at, must be a very, very challenging and difficult mission. You're talking in some cases of people uh, within a country, for example, in civil wars or insurgencies may have been going on for decades. I'm thinking of like the FARC in Colombia against the Colombian government. It went on for 50 years, half a century. So these are very well established, deeply rooted disputes and insurgencies and wars and combat. It must be really tough in some circumstances. And I guess each country will differ, obviously, depending on their histories and the conditions. But as somebody who was involved in it, how do you keep optimistic in situations like that, where you're dealing with people who really, really don't like each other and may not actually have much incentive to actually stop the fighting?
Some of their A lot of those conflicts are geopolitical as well, right? So, but as a peacekeeper, I think when you go to a country as a peacekeeper, or it could be a volunteer with, as a matter of fact, you don't have to be a police peacekeeper, but it could be like in in those countries where we visit, like in Guatemala, there were a lot of also organizations on the Red Cross and a variety of other organizations that were helped to that were over there to help the people. They always all these organizations, they do have one thing in common: they want to try to improve on that country, and at times you have to accept that that's going to be perhaps one person at a time, right? And it's there's a lot of so in the book that I wrote, for example, Leading at the Edge, there are chapters. The let's If we take the chapter 2, it's about the war in Croatia and
Mm-hmm.
one of the Canadian police who went over there. Well, I mean, he's done a back Croatia at the time in 1994 was at Yugoslavia was falling apart and was at war, and
Right.
it was a very difficult mission. And through the story of that police officer, you could feel the frustration that he felt that he wasn't really helping the person, the people there. But I'll
Right.
tell you one thing in that particular example, right? How he showed the Canadian flag. And as a matter of fact, we talk about this is about Canadian, but it could be about any other peacekeeper from any other country. It could be from India, from all that were also part of that mission. So here's my example for that mission and how it changed someone's life. One person only. So there was this Serbian fighter who had been uh, who was living in an enclave, I guess a Croatian enclave, and he was pretty much ostracized by others. And he had been, uh, I guess, shot during the conflict and had lost both of his legs. And he was moving in a dilapidated wheelchair from the 1950s.
Wow.
So when the peacekeeper, Kenyan peacekeeper, in this case, it was Mr. Uh, back then was Corporal John Bewis, saw that. Well, John wanted to do something about this young man because he was probably just in his 20s, right, in a wheelchair. And interestingly, John Bewis, as a Canadian, had been in a lot of trauma as a police officer. He was back then when he was on a mission. He had he had about like close to 19 years service, 15 around that, and he really connected with this individual because John Bewis had also been shot in an incident in Canada where we stopped a car and one of the occupant had a shotgun and shot at John, and John almost lost he almost lost his life and almost lost the use of his legs. So back in Croatia, like 14 years after, John sees this old man that nobody cares about and takes him under his wing. How did he do that? Very simple. Uh, the young man was complaining that he had pain in his leg and he needed treatment. So John just drove him to the hospital every now and then and gave him attention, which this young man did not have. And it gave this young man a reason to continue to fight and survive. And just
Wow.
just that. It's only one person, but he talked to other people, and obviously that's how we kind of promoted also the good thing that peacekeepers do and Canadians do, right? So it was only one person at a time. So
Wow, what a story! What an incredibly powerful, I think, narrative about, like you said, how one person can make a difference. This may be an unfair question, Ben, but you've written about a lot of 10 different missions in which Canadians were involved abroad. Is there one that speaks to you? I won't say your favorite story, but is there one that speaks to you more than others? I mean, aside from obviously your own personal experiences in Guatemala, out of all the stories you collected, is there one that you can point to and say, this is really kind of what it's all about? Or are they all sort of bits and pieces of what you're trying to get across here?
Phil, this is such a difficult question because I've interviewed 9 other peace officers for that mission, and they're all the missions are good, right? And including mine, they're all different. But I will say this though, Phil, it all depends what your audience likes. Well, if you like action pack and high adrenaline, well, the mission in Afghanistan is definitely
Of
the one,
course.
right? And then you can see in that mission and then we work with our military over there. And I can't speak enough of our military in that mission and others because uh, as a former, as you know, as we talked about it earlier, I worked for the same agency as you did work for, as a
Right.
security, which is it was an incredible experience, but also it made me work with the military. And like I said, the military component in a mission is you couldn't do without them. But back to the Afghanistan mission, right? That mission highly packed. The tale of the officer who recounts it, highly packed with incredible story of life and death, and uh, and fear. And then this officer, I mean, talks about like sometimes you see a police officer or a very tough man or that has no fear. Well, in this case, he actually shared how he felt when he arrived in Afghanistan and throughout, and it's a very interesting to learn from him the emotion he went through and how he coped with some of the fears he had and how he took on his fear. So that's an incredible mission. And like I said, packed with adrenaline for sure. Like, wow, how could that be? Now, if you like some other, there's some other missions that are also really interesting, like the one in Haiti, for example,
Mm-hmm.
by a Montreal police officer. That mission is very special in a sense that ethic wise, right? From an ethics perspective, this mission actually took place during the 2010 Asian earthquake, which he survived, and this story is all about the earthquake and the story of survival after the earthquake, and some of the decision this officer had to make, life and death decision on other people, like was incredible, and then you could never expect and as when I signed up for the RCMP or for any, you could never expect to have to make some type of decision from an ethic perspective. You're there to serve and protect the people, and people come to you absolutely desperate on the about to die, and you have to turn them away. You cannot help them, and how difficult it is for a peace officer because you have to do that because there's other people right beside you who also need your help, and you can save these people but you cannot save everybody, and the type of decision you have to make is heart wrenching.
Mm-hmm.
And so that mission itself, uh, Haiti is gonna be is extremely interesting, extremely challenging for that. And then you really hear like story of heroism for sure during the earthquake. Now, if you're someone who likes to learn about uh, the powers of networking, right? Well, the mission in Kosovo is quite something about it. Networking, you don't have to be, networking is very important. And you know what, Phil? Networking can help you uh, get a job that you want in life or reach a goal. It's all so this is networking is not just for police officers, for anyone. It's so important.
Mm-hmm.
And in that particular mission, we talk about, of course, the mission in Kosovo, the policing, and what Canadian did over there. But there's an element of that that I emphasize about networking, because this officer was excellent at networking. And what he did over there in Kosovo, he was able to through his networking abilities, to seek a very high position within the UN, when at the time he was a constable. And for your audience, that well, it's a constable within the policing is the lower rank. Usually you start as a constable and you
Right,
go.
right.
And through his networking ability, and he was very competent as well, he was also able to get, like I said, a highly sought position, and that only higher rank in the past I'd probably had. And so this chapter is also about how you, the can use networking to enhance, I guess, your career, your life, and so on and so forth. So that's good. It's a chapter on that. If you like leadership, chapter one in Namibia is probably the chapter you're gonna like. This is back in
Okay.
1989 when the RCMP actually went to Namibia. It was our first mission, and that was led by now retired Deputy Commissioner Larry Proke. And it's a mission about diplomacy, how we work with other countries. There was India, there was New Zealand over there. There was a whole bunch of there were several countries, and how we all worked together. And some of the challenge that, because back in Namibia, it was that country wanted to become independent from South Africa. And so, what was the role of the peacekeeper in ensuring safe elections, and after that, transforming the police, building a new police? So that mission is all about leadership and diplomacy, and then we can learn a lot from Larry's mission back then, because he was really a leader with a lot of foresight. So for someone from your audience who likes leadership, for sure, the mission about Namibia is the one that they're gonna prefer. Now, if you like goal setting, how important is goal setting in life? Well, I think it's crucial, right? I learned goal setting a little late in life, but you know what? It's so important, again, to help you. That and networking, they go hand in hand. But about goal setting, you're going to love the mission in Sudan. And just about, because this officer never gave up. Just the fact, you will read about his mission in Sudan, but you also learn about the process, how he made it over there, and all the roadblocks he had. And he never said no, and he set goals, and the importance of setting goals, right? And you're going to find that mission absolutely not just fascinating, but you can learn a lot of tips that you can apply to your own life. And for that mission, I'm hoping also when you read that, you can say, hey, goal setting is very important. And then you start to dig into more uh, books about goal setting and the importance of goal setting. Then it can take you to books from a well renowned Canadian author, Brian Tracy, and others that really spend their life explaining how the importance about goal setting and how it can enhance your life and career. So all these little missions are all have something different that I'm hoping will appeal to a variety of readership.
I think it's really important that you've spoken about a number of missions that many Canadians have either forgotten about completely or had no idea. I didn't know we were in Namibia in the late 1980s, so I found that fascinating. But it's usually when Canadians think about having sent our forces abroad, it's usually former Yugoslavia, Afghanistan, and Haiti. But you've got Sierra Leone. You talk about Sudan, of course, Jerusalem, the never-ending Middle East process kind of thing. It comes quite clear, Ben, in talking to you today, that your involvement in Guatemala, as well as the conversations which you had with your contacts and the other missions, has meant a lot to you. Can you summarize in as concrete or as concise a way as possible what this has actually meant for you personally and for your career at the RCMP?
Well, I think for sure my mission in Guatemala was it totally enlarged my horizon from a police officer. It made me uh, get to know, well, you discover, well, you build a lot of friendship, international friendship for one thing. You learn about culture, and especially anyone who loves to travel. you sure get you check mark that for sure, because you get opportunities to travel when you're in a certain country, like say Guatemala, where you do have time off, and then you can travel to nearby countries. So you learn more about the culture, and when you come back, you are definitely a better person. You understand better culture, and then that can also help you within your own community, because we are in Canada multicultural, and therefore when you on the street with the people, it does help you to connect with these people. And in the worst of time, you can use that as a leverage. If I take the example of the RCMP, or Commissioner Brenda Lucky, she did a UN mission earlier in her career, and there's a lot of leading women in the RCMP that have also completed international missions. So, well, for sure, there's more research to do on this as far as impact on career, but you can see the positiveness, all that. But let's not kid ourselves, right? A UN mission is also difficult. It's not just rosy. You could also look on the other side, and there are police officers who have had PTSD as
Of
a
course,
result of,
of
right?
course.
So let's not kid ourselves here. It's not necessarily for everyone, but it's for sure something you don't know until you try, right? There's a lot of atrocities that you can see overseas as well, and that can lead to PTSD. Well, as a matter of fact, my book is not. I don't talk too much about that topic, PTSD, but is it an important one? And for your audience to know that, and what I found that's also troubling in a sense is that it can happen in at any time in your life, especially when you see a lot of trauma and it could be accumulated. There is one peace officer in my book that eventually, 40 years after, got PTSD as a result, and one trigger, one incident was uh, that happened during his mission, right? And it seemed innocuous, that incident, but it did trigger a PTSD event later on in his life.
40 years later.
40
Wow.
years later. So what's important, the message here is that PTSD, you have to take that very seriously. You don't know, you're not nobody is bulletproof. And I think throughout, when we go to when some of these missions, or anything, as a matter of fact, any traumatic event that you can be, it's very important to talk about this and then seek the proper help. Now, I guess I can speak for my organization. I know the RCMP with PTSD has done quite is doing very well in supporting its members, and I'm saying that because I heard it from that member who has had incredible support for that, and is doing actually very well right now. And I can talk about it because he has been open about it in a variety of media. So, but just to tell you, 40 years after, right? So so
Wow. Well,
so mhm.
and listening to you talk, Ben, I mean, I immediately go to Romeo Dallaire, of course, the member of the Canadian military who was in Rwanda during the massacres, the genocide of 1994, and what it's done, excuse me, to him as a person. And I've had the honor of meeting General Dallaire uh, through my affiliation with Concordia, and how one can be present at that absolutely horrendous set of crimes where people are slaughtering other people is beyond imagination. Ben, this has been an absolutely fascinating conversation about a fascinating book. First of all, I do want, as a Canadian, I do want to thank you for your service to our country with the RCMP, and I want to thank you for being very open and honest and talking to me and my listeners today about something really, really important, and that's how Canadians can go abroad and do good. As you said, I think that we do have a good reputation abroad, generally speaking. People like when Canadians go out and try to help. So, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for doing what you've done.
Well, thank you, Phil. I appreciate you inviting me here, and giving me a chance also to talk about my book, but also about policing in general. And if you allow me, if I can have
Please go right ahead.
my I guess the book Leading at the Edge is available at Amazon.com throughout the world, through Amazon as well. And if you're in Canada, it's going to be soon in chapters, as well as I'm coming up with a more economical version of it that's going to be black and white, so you can get that through Amazon as well. So
Well, I'll definitely put a link to it when the podcast is produced. But again, Ben, thank you so much for taking the time, and best of luck in the rest of your career.
Okay. Thank you, Phil. Pleasure.
So that was my conversation with Ben Maure. He's the author of Leading at the Edge, True Tales from Canadian Police in Peace Building and Peacekeeping Missions around the world. What do you think of our conversation? Do you have any experiences working abroad on behalf of Canada, whether it be in military, law enforcement, or diplomacy? I'd love to hear from you. You can reach me on email, borealisrisk@gmail.com, or on Twitter at borealissaves. You can also find me on LinkedIn and on Facebook. If you like this content and want to get more, go to the website, borealisthreatandrisk.com. Hit the subscribe button. You get a free daily digest of all blogs and podcasts free of charge to your inbox. There's also a link there to my new book, The Peaceable Kingdom, A History of Terrorism in Canada from Confederation to the Present. You can get it off the website itself. Love to hear your feedback. I'll talk to you again soon. Until then, stay safe.